A wise man scales a wall, but a fool. They tell us that silence is golden, that a soft answer turns away wrath, but those are proverbs for a world that no longer exists, a world where reason had authority. In our world, the loudest voice often wins the frame, and the person seeking clarity is often strangled by the noise. The mistake we make, the critical error that drains our power, is assuming that everyone we meet is playing the same game of logic. But some people are not playing to understand, they are playing to defend their fragile identity. This is where intelligent people step into a trap built on ego, a trap designed to steal your focus. Think of a situation where you had the facts, the evidence, the clear, logical path forward, and you met a wall of louder opinions, twisted words, and escalating emotion. Suddenly, the conversation was not about truth. It was about pride, about dominance, about who could shout the longest. You left that interaction feeling empty, frustrated, and emotionally depleted, while the other person likely felt victorious. This is the moment you handed over your power. Power is not about proving you are right. It is about deciding where your valuable energy goes. We are going to explore how to navigate these interactions, not by winning arguments, but by outsmarting them. And to understand this, we must understand the strategy of a man who saw the world as it was, not as it should be, Nicolo Machiavelli. Machiavelli knew that in the real world, appearances and emotional reactions often hold more sway than the truth. The smartest people in the room are rarely the ones arguing the most. They are the ones who control the room in quiet, calculated ways. To see this principle in action, we need to meet a man who thought he knew how the game was played, a man named John. John was brilliant, an engineer who valued structure, clarity, and data above all else. He believed that if he could just present the facts, any disagreement would naturally resolve itself. But John was about to meet a force that logic could not defeat, a force named Mark. Mark was the newly appointed project lead, dynamic, confident, and completely uninterested in engineering limitations. He had a vision for a product that was technically impossible given their constraints, but Mark loved the narrative of the impossible. At the first meeting, Mark presented his idea like a grand revelation, painting a picture of market dominance. John, listening calmly, raised his hand and began to lay out the technical data that made Mark's vision a fantasy. He talked about server capacity, budget limitations, and timelines, all supported by detailed spreadsheets. But Mark didn't address the data, he addressed the room. He suggested that John was a pessimist, a bottleneck, someone who didn't believe in the company's potential. He turned an engineering question into a character judgment. John was stunned. Instead of defending his data, he found himself defending his commitment. The conversation spiraled, Mark getting louder and more emotional, John getting quieter and more defensive. By the end, the room was looking at Mark's inspiring vision, and John's uncomfortable data was forgotten. John left that meeting exhausted and defeated. The first rule he forgot is recognizing when logic has no value. John made the intelligent mistake of assuming Mark was searching for the best technical solution. But Mark was searching for validation, for authority, and to protect his identity as a visionary leader. When a conversation shifts from truth to performance, facts become irrelevant noise that is seen as a threat. Intelligent people notice this early. They look for the signals: constant interruption, exaggerated claims, and emotional volatility. This is the moment to disengage, not because you cannot win, but because you are playing chess on a board that is being shaken. The rules are no longer respected, and continuing only confirms that you are willing to fight in the chaos. But John went home and replayed the meeting. He spent hours crafting the perfect email full of even more data, better graphs, and undeniable proofs. He spent his entire evening and most of his sleep schedule preparing this counterattack. He was falling into the second trap, refusing to waste his energy. John was guarding his professional reputation, but he was failing to guard his mental and emotional attention. Every hour spent on Mark was an hour not spent on solving actual problems. This is the hidden cost of arguing with a fool. They steal your focus and leave you depleted. Successful strategy requires clarity and clarity cannot exist in a mind constantly dragged into trivial disputes. A pointless conflict can linger in your thoughts for days. And while you are replaying your clever comebacks, the other person has likely moved on to their next disruption. The email John sent didn't work. Mark merely skimmed it and used it as evidence that John was obsessive. At the next meeting, John sat quiet, waiting for his moment to deliver the finishing logical blow. He was failing to understand that silence is a psychological weapon. John's instinct was to jump in to correct, to clarify his position. But silence can change the entire dynamic and rhythm of an interaction. Most fools depend on reactions to maintain their momentum. They need your anger, your defensiveness, your engagement to fuel their narrative. But when they meet only a steady, calm absence of engagement, the tension they tried to create collapses. Silence forces them to continue speaking without resistance. And something fascinating happens when people talk without interruption. They reveal too much. They exaggerate, they contradict themselves, they expose the emotional motives hidden beneath their words. John didn't use silence strategically. He used it as a shield waiting to attack. But he should have let Mark's own contradictions reveal his incompetence. Mark, sensing the room was with him, began to make increasingly wild claims about how the engineering team would deliver the impossible. He was creating the perfect battlefield, one built on noise and performance. This is the moment strategic thinkers make their move. They refuse to fight on that battlefield. John could see Mark was relying on perception and crowd dynamics to win. So John did something different. He did not debate Mark in front of the team. He waited until after the meeting, when the audience had dissolved. He requested a private 5-minute chat with Mark to clarify one critical data point. In this environment, chaos has no protection volume, has no meaning. You move discussions from the noisy battlefield to the calm ground where logic can breathe. Here is where John made his true mistake. He let Mark set the frame of the conversation. Mark's frame was John is a blocker, preventing innovation. John kept responding to that frame, trying to prove he was a team player. But he should have changed the lens through which the conversation was viewed. Instead of arguing about his character, John should have shifted the frame to shared risk. He could have asked Mark, if the system fails, who is responsible, to explain that to the board. That simple question changes the frame from innovation to accountability. Suddenly, Mark's grand vision is a personal risk. It forces the other person to examine the consequences of their own ideas. It guides the discussion toward deeper thinking without a direct confrontation. But John instead was met with anger from Mark. This time John didn't try to explain or defend himself. He practiced strategic indifference. This doesn't mean he didn't care about the outcome. It means he chose not to reward foolish behavior with emotional attention. A stone in a lake creates a quiet ripple, not a drama. This neutrality removed the spectacle that Mark hoped to create. Attempts to provoke a reaction are met with an emotional blank slate. When people attempt to use emotion to control you and fail, they lose their influence over you. They might get louder or more exaggerated, but without your reaction, their efforts feel empty to everyone watching. This calmness signals that your attention is selective and limited. It strengthens your presence, making you appear composed and focused while others are reactive. John, now clear in his mind, didn't force a correction. He let time reveal the truth. The urge to immediately correct a mistake feels urgent. But rushing to challenge someone can create stubbornness, not clarity. Time has a unique ability to expose inconsistency. The impossible engineering demands that Mark made could not hold up against reality. Deadlines were missed, prototypes failed, promises were broken. John didn't have to say, "I told you so." He had documented the dates, the warnings, the data, and the actual outcomes. When the project inevitably struggled, the facts spoke clearly on their own. He didn't need long arguments, he only needed patience. By waiting, he avoided unnecessary conflict, while reality performed the correction. And finally, when the dust settled, John didn't focus on his ego. He asked what outcome actually matters here. The goal was not to humiliate Mark. The goal was to fix the project and protect the company. John didn't waste energy celebrating a logical victory. He channeled his attention into actions that could create actual progress. This pragmatic approach focused on effectiveness rather than appearances. The smartest people rarely argue because they are too busy moving steadily toward results. True intelligence is measured by the consistency with which you achieve meaningful outcomes. It depends on the discipline to choose your battles and protect your focus. And it depends on the ability to remain calm while others are losing control. You do not need to defeat fools in arguments. Most of the time, if you are patient enough, they will defeat themselves. To learn more strategies on how to move through the world with control and clarity, please subscribe to my channel Deep Mind Portal.